Welcome to this episode. Picture this. You're at a wedding in the Austrian Alps, the schnitzel's been served, the band is playing, and suddenly, the bride is just gone. Not upset and left the room gone, kidnapped gone, by her own friends. And now the groom has to go find her in a bar somewhere in town, and when he does, he's going to have to pay for a whole lot of drinks just to get her back. This is a real wedding tradition, still happening today, called Brautentführung. That's German for bride abduction. And just like a lot of wedding customs we love to romanticize, the story behind it is a little messier and honestly a little darker than the fun version we see at parties today. So let's dig into what's true, what's exaggerated, and where this tradition actually comes from. Here's the ritual in practice. Sometime during the wedding reception, often while everyone's distracted by dancing or dessert, a group of the couple's closest friends, usually led by the best man, quietly grabs the bride and sneaks her out of the venue. They're not going far. They head to a nearby pub, a local, as they call it in Austria, and they start ordering rounds of drinks. Sometimes they stay in one place, sometimes they hop from bar to bar, running up a tab everywhere they go. Meanwhile, back at the reception, the groom is supposed to notice his new wife has vanished, which, in the middle of a loud party, isn't always as fast as you'd think. Once he clues in, he grabs a few friends and goes hunting for her, following little clues the kidnappers leave behind, almost like a scavenger hunt. And when he finally tracks her down, he doesn't just get to walk in and take her back. First, he has to pay. Specifically, he has to settle the entire bar bill his friends have racked up. And in a lot of Austrian and Bavarian weddings, money alone isn't enough. He's also expected to sing something called a Stanzel. Now, quick translation break, because that word deserves an explanation. A Stanzel is a short, often improvised, funny little rhyming folk verse, sung out loud, usually a bit teasing or self-deprecating, set to a simple traditional melody. Think of it as an on-the-spot musical roast, except the groom is roasting himself in front of a bar full of people to prove his devotion. Sometimes, instead of singing, he has to grant his bride a few wishes or complete some silly little challenge the friends dream up. Only after all that does the couple walk, or often dance a waltz, back to the wedding party together. So why do people do this to a groom on what's supposed to be one of the best days of his life? The most common explanation is that it's a playful test, basically a way of asking, how much do you actually care about this woman? The idea is that the faster and more enthusiastically the groom searches for his bride, and the more willingly he pays up and makes a fool of himself with a Stanzel, the more it proves how much he loves her. It's a bit like a wedding day dare, wrapped in affection. There's a second layer of meaning that's a little more old-fashioned, the idea that the bride is symbolically being separated from her old life, from her parents' house, from her single life, before formally starting her new one with her husband. And there's a third interpretation that's basically just a gentle warning to the groom. From now on, you need to keep an eye on your wife and take care of her, because look how easily she disappeared right under your nose. Today, though, if you ask most Austrian couples why they do it, the honest answer is usually much simpler than any of that symbolism. It's just fun. It gets guests moving, gives the wedding party some comic relief, and creates a great story everyone tells for years. Here's where I need to do some myth-busting, because this is the part almost every wedding blog gets a little too dramatic about. The most repeated origin story claims this tradition goes back to the Middle Ages, to something called the rite of the first night. According to that story, feudal lords supposedly had the legal right to spend the wedding night with any peasant bride in their territory before her own husband did. And the theory goes that today's kidnapping is a leftover echo of the lord's men literally coming to collect the bride after the wedding. It's a striking story. It's also, according to actual historians, almost certainly not true, at least not as a real enforced legal right. Multiple historical sources describe the rite of the first night as something much closer to a literary invention than a documented medieval law. There's no solid legal record of it ever being systematically practiced. It shows up in fiction and folklore far more than it shows up in real court or property records. So just like Handfasting's fake 7000 BC Celtic ritual backstory, this is a case of a dramatic myth getting repeated so often that people assume it's settled history, when it really isn't. If we set that shaky theory aside, the more grounded explanations are the symbolic ones we already covered, separating the bride from her old household or teaching the groom a lesson about vigilance. Historically speaking, we simply don't have airtight documentation of exactly when or why this custom started. What we do know is that it's been a recognized part of wedding folklore in Austria, Bavaria, and Switzerland for a long time, passed down informally rather than through any official record. There's no precise global or even national statistic on exactly how many couples do this. Nobody's out there counting bride kidnappings every wedding season. But based on how consistently it shows up across wedding planning guides, folklore collections, and regional wedding traditions lists, it's clearly still a live, actively practiced custom, not some forgotten relic. It's described as especially popular in Carinthia, a region in southern Austria, but you'll find it across large parts of the country. Wedding planners actually give practical advice about it, like keeping it under an hour, warning the bartender ahead of time, and checking with the couple beforehand, which tells you this is something people are actively organizing at real weddings happening this year, not just a story from your grandparents' era. It's also worth saying clearly, this is not just an Austrian thing. The exact same custom, pub crawl and all, is just as common across the border in Bavaria, in southern Germany, and it shows up in Switzerland too. So really, this belongs to a broader Alpine, German-speaking cultural zone rather than being uniquely Austrian. Widening the lens, capturing the bride as a wedding theme, has old roots elsewhere too. The most famous historical echo is the Roman legend of the abduction of the Sabine women, where Roman men, facing a shortage of eligible women, staged a festival specifically to abduct young women from a neighboring group to become their wives. That's treated as founding myth rather than fact, but it shows the same core idea, a dramatic capture wrapped around a marriage, showing up independently in a completely different culture and era. You can also find looser ransom-style echoes in Balkan wedding traditions, where a groom has to complete challenges and pay a symbolic price to the bride's family before he can claim her. But here's an important distinction I want to be really clear about. What we're talking about in Austria is a consensual, good-natured party game. Everyone involved, the bride, the groom, the friends, knows exactly what's happening and is in on the joke. That is completely different from actual, non-consensual bride abduction, which tragically still exists as a real and coercive practice in parts of the world today. Those are not games, and they're not something to romanticize or compare lightly to a wedding night pub crawl. The Austrian custom only works and only stays fun because it's built entirely on the couple's willing participation. So here's where we land. The Austrian bride kidnapping tradition, Brautentführung, is absolutely real, still practiced today, and yes, it really does involve friends whisking the bride to a bar while the groom has to hunt her down and pay up, sometimes with a song thrown in. But it's not some uniquely Austrian secret. It's shared just as strongly with Bavaria and Switzerland. And its most dramatic origin story, the medieval rite of the first night, is very likely more legend than documented history. What's left once you strip away the myth is still a genuinely charming custom, a playful little obstacle course of love, humor, and a round of drinks, designed to remind a brand new husband that keeping track of the person he just married is going to be a lifelong job. That's it for today's episode. If you know someone getting married in the Alps this year, maybe warn the bartender. See you next time.